Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Hey guys, hey everybody. My name is Ben, I'm the co-founder of Tylko, and I'm super happy to have you all here today. Thank you for sharing your time with us. We made this space to have moments like this, and we made this space thanks to Paul and his studio Cloud over here. So please maybe encourage him with a round of applause to start with. And of course to the hard work of our team, including Hanya over here and all of the Tylko people that you see around, so please give it up for them. Cool. So we're happy to be a part of Berlin Design Week, and we also wanted to have a non-ordinary showroom to be able to host events like this in this beautiful area of Mitte. So expect to see more from us, not only around design, but also around music. Those are the two things that this space is going to be about. So yeah, thank you for coming and looking forward to seeing you. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for the welcome. And yeah, we're just going to go ahead and start with the talk. Thanks for the intro. My name is Hania Szkarłat, and I will be in conversation today with Paul Cournet, the founder of Studio Cloud, the author of Tylko Space. We're going to be talking about expanding forms of architectural practice. But before we dive much deeper, I would like to do, for you, Paul, to do a mental experiment and maybe go back in time. You spent a decade at OMA, Office for Metropolitan Architecture, founded by Rem Koolhaas in Rotterdam, but it has offices all around the world. It's very opinion-forming, it's very influential, and you left it. You started Cloud in 2022, and I just wanted to for you to give us a little bit of a background. Why did you decide that it was the time to leave when you did? What did you take from OMA and continued in your own practice? And what did you decide to not do? So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I hope we have 2 days to talk about that. It's going to be my weekend therapy in Berlin. Thank you, Tylko, for supporting my therapy this weekend.
You're welcome. Yeah, welcome to the therapy session, guys. Strap on in. Get yourself comfortable.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. Thank you, Hania, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be back in Berlin. We've been here a few times now, and yeah, it's indeed great, as Ben was saying, to be back in a space. Last time where we organized a party here, we had DJs, and then here to use the talk as we were discussing it, that we could organize talks and events, so it's actually very nice to see that this is possible. Why did I leave? Yeah, I don't know. I was one day making a joke that I quit. I was 32, and I feel like I retired from like corporate architecture, like in early age. But it was, it's like, and now indeed I have my own architecture studio in Rotterdam still. I think it was like I worked there for like over a decade, and I think I was very young when I joined there. I just turned 22. So for me, coming from France and public school and working there for 10 years, that was really my education. And I made my education by working. I left school to do that, and that was an internship that became my job for a long time. And it was just a very great experience, amazing things. I've done it all, in a way, like working on very big projects, very ambitious cultural programs, doing fashion show, working with, quote unquote, the biggest brands and clients. But just at some point, it's not enough, And I feel after COVID, especially, so that was 4+ years ago, I felt it was just time for a change. And at that time, I just felt like that was not necessarily the place for me anymore to grow or be creative in my own way. And the only way to be more fulfilled was just to start something different. And that happened to be my little studio. I just started by like renting a desk at some architect friends of mine, and just to go back to what I really love, which was to be creative and find the freedom that I feel I probably had lost at that time. So I think that was in a nutshell, I think that was the reason.
You talked about retiring from corporate architecture, and cloud and your practice is very much about connecting different fields. Most architectural studios, they use this typology, they do housing, they do office space, they follow a very specific path. And you as cloud define yourselves by materiality. And I really wanted to ask why choose that? And why introduce different forms of practice into architecture?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes a bit, I don't know, if I try to look back, it's always hard to like explain, why you do certain things. It's like, it just, a lot
Try
of...
me.
Yeah, it's like you just end up doing things and that's your journey. I came as a kid, from like, my thing was graffiti. That was my way of like being creative before architecture, and architecture was a way for me to learn from like cities and travels that I was doing at that time. And so I think I've been generally always architecture for me has been a way to connect with people and have a sort of broader understanding of like just building buildings. And I mean, I'm excited about like the act of doing architecture, but more than just the process of it, I just feel it's an incredible vehicle to connect people, and then with cloud basically I've been always just fascinated by this idea that, well, we can design a store which is not a store, that becomes a project where you develop a sound system, or work on exhibitions, or make a book. There's a few slides here that I was requested kindly to share with you guys today, where you see a bit the scope of things we do, but we work with museums. This is the renovation of the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. We work with brands, we work with private clients. Every project is a kind of a new type of project. And indeed, I'm also having a bit sometimes a hard time trying to explain to people what we do, because people are like, for instance, just to give you another type of project, we just launched now in Milan a new media platform called Album, with my friends from Apartamento magazine. And I have someone coming to me on the opening night. The person was like, "Oh yeah, you're the podcast guy." And I was like, "Well, kind of, am I?" I mean, yeah, I love having conversations with people and recording it, and that becomes a podcast. But I guess that makes me a podcast guy now, but that's not really the core of what I do. I love to have conversations, and for me, for instance, tonight, this is architecture, like the fact that we are together in a room and then bringing people together and then having a conversation. This is the core of what architecture really is about. So yeah, that's what I mean, is that we can do like a furniture made of mud, or working with a museum, or doing a store. All of that kind of interests me, And as trying to rationalize what we're doing, or trying to find a red thread across everything we do, I think one thing also to talk about my first career, my past career, I felt like by being an architect on very large scale projects, you lose sense with materiality. You just projects are so big and the compromises are so strong that essentially you lose touch with quality. And when I left, that was one of my big drivers to be like, I want to go back to quality. And I think in a moment now in time where, we've seen centuries of modernity and modernization that have, it's like been like this crazy process of like, I don't know, of building stuff, of adding stuff. I just feel that we are in a moment in time where, especially us as architects, but creatives, whoever you guys are, if you're like artists or creatives or in any kind of way, I feel this thing of materiality is a very good way to approach architecture, and then trying to find back this touch and feeling of like materiality. So materiality meaning, like the sense of creating something. And then trying to find quality in the materials you were going to use and creating storytelling around them. So it's going to be, like in every project we do, from like an installation for Nike in Milan during for a sports event, or just trying to, instead of thinking like concept, and I think this is also where I was coming from, like this like big, star architecture idea of like architecture being like a big concept, and then you have a sort of genius idea we were talking about earlier. You have a genius idea, and then eventually you figure out how you're going to build it, but try to reverse that scale and say, well, actually you could start from the ground up and then start from like materials and try to tell a story about locality and craftsmanship and resources, and that informs the design process, and that defines like your final shape. So that's a little bit what we're doing, and I think it's just very exciting, and we're learning a lot through that, and so therefore materiality.
And I wanted to ask also, because Oma recently published a book which is more of a manifesto. It's called Architecture Against Architecture. And it really dissects this crisis facing 21st century architectural profession. And it opens with a really blunt claim that architecture in its current form has lost all credibility. And this is, I feel like, sort of you brushed with talking about modernity and losing the contact to materiality. Could you maybe a little bit expand on this and say if you would agree with this bold statement? Or do you think it's just flashy and for show?
I mean, I agree, yes. But I don't know if we're on a record here, it looks like it. Well, I agree with the statement, but what is interesting to talk about an office that has been very, how to put that in a good way, very explicit about the idea of context. By taking a quote out of context, it's probably a quote that has been said by the people that actually caused that situation where we are currently. And I agree very much to it, but I think sometimes, I think a lot of us worked with for practices that should kind of look in the mirror and look what they've done and understand if the traumas or the kind of issues we're talking about today, where they were and what they did to really elevate the conversation. So I think, yeah, architecture is in crisis, but I also feel, for instance, when I graduated, or I didn't graduate actually, I never finished school, but when I finished school, it was 2009, I was just after the crisis of 2008, and at that time I was like, oh, I'm not going to find any work, and but I think it's in the moments of crisis, in the toughest moments, that actually the most interesting outcomes come out. So probably now we are in a current crisis, and that will probably last for long. We need to get used to it. Globally, when you just look at the world out there and open the newspaper, it's pretty grim, But I think this is the most interesting and challenging times where we can create newness. And therefore, I'm also very optimistic today about us and the new generation. I've been like working now for, what I guess is like 15 years. So I'm like, kind of like, I see the younger generation coming out of schools and stuff. But I think it's just a very, very exciting moment to rethink how we're doing things and create something new and rethink what design means for us today. So an architecture and then being a creative in the world today. So I'm just very generally, super optimistic and excited about what comes up. And I don't know, if I open social media today, I see so many people doing so many new things, and people that have, just very young people, doing very exciting things. So I think this is also what's really like, I don't know, just exciting about today, to see that just so much is happening in a good way.
You said you didn't finish school, so I want to go back to that for a second, because I was also thinking, I come from a family of architects, and hence architects hang out with other architects, so there's plenty of architects around me. And I feel like many people go into this profession with great ideals. And I feel then when you come out of school, you're not really well prepared for the job market and for the realities of the profession. So I'm wondering, why did you never finish school, and what would you think education, I think this is a very broad question because there's different approaches to teaching architecture, obviously, but in general, what is missing there? And if we're thinking about the profession, should we maybe start at the basics, how we teach it in order to change something?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, where to start here? I think, I mean, I studied architecture because I was interested to learn about it. And I never really had that idea of like becoming an architect with a big A, you know, I was just, as I was saying maybe earlier, like, I was just interested to learn and curious about it. And funny enough, when I look now, most of my friends are not architects. And I think a lot of the things you do in life are just so much related to people around you as like, you know, either your family or friends. And I feel school can provide you, you know, some tools. In my case, for instance, I really felt when I was in the middle of the process, I was saying 2009, I was like, if I graduate now, I'm never going to get any job, and I'm living in Paris. I'm going to be like a poor, starving artist. It's just, you know, it was not very exciting. So my way of thinking about it was more like, hey, I have to kind of learn the hard way. I'm just going to do like a long internship, and I'm going to work for someone I admire, and then hopefully through that I will learn better, like what it really means, like being part of the industry. But I think indeed, like a lot of what the school can offer you, at least from my experience, and maybe you know, I know people have great school experience, but my school experience was definitely not great. Or when I look back, I'm kind of like that. You know, sometimes when you're in certain places, you're like, oh, I want to embrace that and do that better. But sometimes you grow up as a reaction. You know, you want to grow against something. You know, and for me, that was maybe more that second route, that I was more like, oh, I definitely don't want to be that person. But I think a lot of, you know, things that I do today, for instance, I mean, it's been 15 years that I've been working, but a lot of things that I do today are so directly connected to my friends, and I think that's probably the thing that you know, it takes time, obviously, but surrounding yourself by the right people are essentially the people that will, you know, if you look at it like job perspective later in life, I think these are the best way or the best people you end up want to work with, you know, either because they're colleagues or clients or collaborators at the end of the day. And I think that's why also I decided, or I ended up creating my own studio, because I wanted to find that freedom of collaborating with people I just love to work with, and say yes to certain projects and not no to others. But I think it's more and more, this is maybe something I realized with time as well, is that the best projects are the ones that you do with the people you share interests, you know, and that thing of us, for instance, creating now a project around sound is a conversation that could have never happened out of a brief. We created the brief. We didn't need a brief. We made the brief, you know. It's through conversations that you end up creating the best opportunities around you. So school is one thing, work is another one, but yeah, I don't know. I'm at the moment of my life when I realize, or I feel like actually the most interesting or rewarding projects I've been working on were the ones that, yeah, I share that with people I admire or I love, or I share interests. And this is, yeah, a piece of advice that I would have is just to try to find those people and then keep them close to you, and make them help you find that freedom that you explore through your creative journey.
So school is one thing, job is another, and then community, it sounds like, is a big thing as well. So we're talking about the crisis, and you know, many architects are quite frustrated with how the market looks like, and I'm just wondering, because cloud crosses into so many other things, and you yourself, like you said, you just launched Album, which is like a multidisciplinary media brand or media platform that you did with friends. You're opening Echo, which is like a sound space in listening space in Rotterdam. You're doing Tylko sound speakers with Tylko. But also editorial projects. You work with cultural institutions. So I guess, is architecture the thing that ties it all together for you, and sort of crossing over this rigid constraint that architects sort of put on themselves sometimes. I feel like, is this where you find freedom, or this is how you deal with the crisis? Because I feel like you do it on a very like base emotional level, but maybe you have thought it through, but maybe you can tell us more about a bit about that approach.
I mean, yeah, it's true that I'm having a hard time to say no. That's maybe, sometimes your quality becomes your, how do you call that? Like the.
I'm the same, so I get it.
Yeah. Like also like the the vices or the backside of the medal. So I'm always like, yeah, let's do it. And after like, fuck, we have to do it now. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just love, using projects to engage in conversation and do stuff with people. So it might be an architecture studio, it might be a magazine, it might be speaker, it might be a space dedicated to sound. I think also like your schedule is defined by, you set up your schedule, and earlier I said, we didn't need a brief. But I think also that's also something that maybe in architecture there's been this like always thinking that architect work with a brief, and I get it, it makes sense, it's clients and you work for clients. Or there's been this huge culture of competitions as well, of like, you have receive a brief and then you have to read it and then design a building out of that. That's you. So you wait for the brief to like find work somehow. But I think also, again, if you want to like create a practice that is really yours and that is deeply personal, more and more I also feel that actually the best way to do so are just to create your own brief, and this is only possible when you engage in conversation with people that understand that, and maybe there's not it's hard to find those people, but I strive for that, I strive for finding people that all of a sudden you just connect the dots together, and then that ends up becoming a project. And sometimes there's a sort of a business model behind it, and then you're like, oh, okay, we're gonna do, I don't know, a magazine and we're gonna sell it, or we're gonna do a media platform and then we're gonna find a client that's gonna pay for it. But in a lot of cases, so for instance, in the case of Album, to talk about that we launched in Milan, it was just me and my friends from Appartamento magazine having conversation for like a year, and then just hanging out at dinners, and then discussing just ideas, and then at some point saying, hey, let's create together a new platform. We're not going to do a magazine because the magazine is very hard to run. We've done it before, them with Appartamento, me with Capsule. It relies on like regular schedule of publication. It relates on brands that just want to get ads in your magazine. It's a lot of work. So we're like, hey, but let's do something digital that will live online. It's just very easy to produce. You get a really big reach out of it, and then we just launched it. We just took over a very small space in Milan, which is called Bene Bene. It's a bar. It's like not even half that space, so it was very modest. But it was amazing, and we did it, and we just brought a lot of people together. And then when you have like 1,000+ people coming to you for the opening, and a lot of your friends and people and friends of friends, I think it's the best feeling. And we'll see what happens to it. But this is typically the kind of initiative that I think start from nothing, and then you just create that with a bunch of friends, and you share like a passion or vision for it, and then I'm pretty sure that it will become something, and it might take time. That's the reality of it. That also, like, I feel a lot of people are like now really running for quick wins, and I understand everybody's got to pay bills and everybody has like responsibilities, and we have kids and all of these things. But if you're able to create projects that have a deep cultural value, I feel in a lot of cases, if you work hard enough, you will be able to turn that into something, sustainable, and that can sustain itself, and that can pay itself and pay the investments. And I realize that this is much more possible than what you would think of. So that's a little bit my state of mind at the moment.
So stepping back for a while from these philosophical questions, we're inside of your one of your projects right now, in Clouds projects. you were tasked with a very difficult thing to do because it's our first offline space and the first showroom, and Tylko has existed only online prior to having this space. So how did you end up translating the DNA of the brand to make this showroom, but also what did you want people to feel when they...
Do we have to use the word showroom? I thought
Whoops.
Ben, oopsie. Yeah, actually, the first conversation I had with Ben was probably on DM on Instagram, and he was like, "Paul, I want to do not a showroom in Berlin." So I was like, interesting. So yeah, I think the idea was a bit also like, to think, okay, well, especially for Tylko, but I think that could be applied for any brand, let's say, is to think, okay, today people buy online. I buy online, we buy clothes online, we buy products online. So why do we really need shops? I mean, yeah, of course you will say, well, I want to buy pants or a t-shirt because I want to try it. I'm not sure, you know. But I think more than that, especially for a brand that sells shelvings, and so you would, in any case, not leave the store with your shelves under your shoulder. But I think the idea was try to create a space for people, a space for community to welcome people. And I think this is the best gift you can do to like a city, in a way, is to be able to take over this space. I think it was like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was like an ice cream factory here, like back in the days, like originally. That's why you have all these tiles. There was like sort of like a workshop area here. And it's a bit of a weird space, right? Because we have 3 rooms. So when we were looking for space as well, we were like, is this gonna work? 3 rooms, this is a bit complicated. We just want to do one gesture. Like, we just want to have a big open room where we organize events. That was a little bit the idea. But through conversation, we realized, hey, actually, if we have a space with 3 rooms, we could layer a story on different layers, and each room could be saying something different about Tilko's DNA. And so this is kind of what we did. So the first room is sort of the cafe or the window to the streets. The middle room, we called it the library. So this is where you go through samples and material, and you talk about the materiality of Tilko. And the third room, which is here, which is a bit of a double space, we called it the salon, which is a multi-use space where you can organize talks, listening sessions, events. And so, yeah, that was a little bit the early conversations to try to create that, and then in a way, you know, like use the power of Tilko to engage a community of Berliners that are, I think, if I remember well as well, the biggest community from Tilko. So like there's a big group of people here that already know what Tilko is about, but you just want to bring them together. So upstairs we have a table, so all the staff members are all either designers or a design background, so they can help people design stuff and make decisions. So yeah, it's just a great space. You can come back and hang out for an hour just to listen to some music, spend the day with your friends, have a coffee. So we were just like, you know, having sort of a drawing board on the wall, and then we're like, it's more like showroom ? What can we do in a space that's normally you could not do in a shop? And that was the early conversations, and I think that was just super fun. And Ben was like, we're gonna do that in 3 months, and I was like, sure. So it took us a year, and then we're still like fixing things, you know. But I think it's for the better.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beauty of the space that if you have people access to it and try to do many things and invite the community as well, hence why you guys are here today, then it's about doing the little tweaks to make it work better. But I also wanted to ask you, where does sound fit in all of that? Because the Tylko Space is one of the projects that you have going on with the brand, and we're just soon launching another project that we have teased, which are the beautiful speakers that you can see behind us. And I'm just wondering, where does sound? Why is it so tightly knit within your practice? And yeah, just
Yeah, sound.
away.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always been like into music. I can't explain how or when, but I think it's definitely like rooted also with my years spent doing graffiti and painting and skateboard, and music was like a big part of that as well. And I've always been interested in it. To be honest, like also I feel like over the last 10 years, like kind of my radar, I took a bit of distance from it. But in the recent years, I feel I've been so obsessed with the ideas of an architect to understand more how sound works. And not, I mean, I love listening to music and buying records and all of these kind of things, but I'm just really, super like interested into the relationship between space and sound. And how do you do that? You do that through a sound system. And if you look today a bit at the landscape of like sound systems, either you go for the like, basic brands that's out there and then everybody knows, not to name any of them, but you just the, off-the-shelf speakers, or you can also talking about quality and materiality and all of these things, try to think how can I enhance an experience that would be so much more elevated than just putting a Sonos beep speaker in my room, but could you even think of designing it, And so I think Ben had, funny enough, we were born the same year, so I feel we probably grew up the same generation with MTV and all of these kind of things before. But Ben also had like himself like a lot of interest around sound, and when I heard that high quality speakers are built of plywood and that Tylko shelvings are also built of plywood, I was like, toom, toom, toom. Okay, we have to make speakers now. So this is kind of like, and I've been calling Ben a lot in the evening or texting him like, Ben, we should do a speaker. And then we just made one. And first I was also like, I'm going to do it myself. Like, I can do it, right? So I spent like a week like going through these like Reddit forums and things. I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to get some drivers. We're going to build a box. It's not complicated, right? It's just a speaker. But then at the end of that week, I was like, no way, I can't do that alone. This is impossible. This is like the biggest rabbit hole.
Maybe if you give it more time than just a week to build a speaker.
Yeah. But I realized I would need a year to like kind of start understanding what I'm like talking about. You need special softwares and the whole thing. And I was like, this is just, it makes sense now. There's people that call sound engineers that do that for money, So being based in Rotterdam, actually I had an old colleague of mine, Miguel, that started a speaker project with a sound engineer. Now they call Form Follow Frequency. And Angie from my team was like, these guys are around the corner, maybe we should have a coffee with them. And then they came and I told them my idea. And I was just thinking Tylko has this system of shelvings that it's all like per centimeter, but the heights are defined per specific heights. And why do people buy speakers and then they insert them into shelvings? But how come there's not a system that things match perfectly? And so I was just like, let's just make a cube and then insert it inside the shelf. And so this is what we did. We just made a mock-up and I was like, is this gonna work? And then we tested it in my studio and that was amazing. And I called Ben and I was like, it's just a mock-up. So Ben was kind of kind enough to say, well, we're gonna pay you for the first mock-up, we're just gonna pay the production. We produced it in Rotterdam. And I remember like, putting the record on. We had got this, I was just back from Japan at that time, and also I kind of over the years I stopped collecting vinyls. I had no vinyls, actually they're all at my parents in France, and I have literally nothing in Rotterdam. But because of that, I ended up buying a record player, and when I was back from Japan, I bought loads of records. And so we tested the sound system, and I called Ben, and I was like, Ben, this one looks amazing, and two, sound is amazing, And I was like, this is actually special. And I was like, I'm not trying to pitch you something. I just prefer to tell you, I think it's actually amazing what we're doing here. And it was pretty simple. It's just a plywood box again, and with a driver inside. I mean, of course, it's been engineered, and then thanks to Form Follow Frequency, we could do it together. But then, so it's been like, and then we were working on the showroom in the same time, non-showroom. Yeah. And then we said, hey, why not should we build a set of speakers for Berlin and then use that in a space? So somehow for me over time the showroom became an excuse to launch these speakers, and it's been softly launched, and now we're talking about it, which is quite funny because Also, as I was saying earlier, we didn't have a brief. We created that brief. You know, it's like if you're working with a brand and you have a strong idea, don't wait for the brand to tell you what to do. Just go to the brand with like an idea, have conversations, and try to build together like a project, you know. And I think this is what we did, and it's very exciting. And we've spent the last 6 to 9. Actually, we started last summer already, so it's been a good 9 months that we have been working on that. But yeah, hopefully that becomes something very soon. So it's pretty cool, and as an architect also, it's actually quite exciting to be able to do more products. So things, objects that fill your spaces. So it's a bit of a new thing for me as well. But yeah, it's just a new thing, and I hope people will like it. And so far, people that have seen it are asking when it's going to be launched. So I'm quite positive about it.
Yeah, launching soon, so you know, pay close attention. But I also wanted to ask, because you said you had to. It's really different working on a project than on an interior or a different piece of architectural design. What was the like surprising thing that you learned throughout this whole journey, or in general working with sound engineers and just really diving deep into this world that has its own rules, I feel like?
Yeah. I think the biggest learning that I'm still realizing now is that you can have the best sound system ever, but if your space is shit, it's gonna sound like shit. And that is crazy how much space influences the way you experience sound. You could have a sound system of 100,000+ euros, but if you're in a concrete box, it's not gonna sound good. And if you have actually a very basic sound system, but you took care of all the things you can take care of around it to make it sound good, the experience of sound is going to be so different. And that is actually crazy, because now indeed we are building Echo, which is this new listening space that will open in Rotterdam very soon. And as we are building it, you know, we've been, I don't know, do things like acoustic ceiling and then curtains and then using wood instead of metal or concrete. And I think all of that just gives you such, and just the way you would sit with your ear based on the speaker, also you will have such a different experience of sound. And I mean, I had listened to music before, and then, you know, like everybody, I've been to bars and clubs, and I had home speakers and those kind of things. But really, when you start like going into this rabbit hole, yeah, there's so much to it, you know. Like I was watching a funny video the other day of like Japan. They're really like obsessed with it, you know. They have these listening bars. It kind of comes from them. It's called Kisa, but people have been like living in these crappy small houses, but the whole house is like a huge speaker. And then you have these Japanese guys that is like to show you how deep you can go. You know, you can go into like the quality of your cables and then the mixer and your amplifier, all of that. But in Japan, if you really want to go like the best sound at home, you hear this older Japanese man who was saying, I had to call the city to create in the streets a new electrical group just for my house, so I would not get electricity disturbance from my neighbors when they have peaks of usage of electricity. So this Japanese man ordered a new, I don't know how you call that, this sort of, not a generator, but like electrical meter in the streets, just so he would have the purest electricity going to his house, so that could feed the best sound in his living room, you know. And that is insane, you know. But it's it's a craft. Sound is a craft. Like furniture is a craft, architecture is a craft, music is a craft. Sound is a real craft, and it can become really obsessive, you know, if you're into it.
Maybe one last question to wrap things up, because I also want to give our audience a chance to ask you some questions. But from what I gather, and you know, your whole practice and going very deeply into the experience through senses with sound, but also materiality in your practice, I just am wondering, because everybody is banging on about AI right now. It's everywhere, and we're incorporating it very heavily into our lives and into our work. And just basically all across. So I'm wondering, where does it fit into a hybrid practice of yours, but a practice that is also very much about being close with the object and being, close with going deep into sensual experience?
AI.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, honestly, like I use AI every day. I'm gonna, just for like more for like a bouncing board, or when I need information, I use that a lot. Like also I don't need to name any platforms, but like the usual suspects, I use that every day. Like if I need to know something, like about war in Europe or in the rest of the world, I'm like, what is the situation right now in Qatar? It's like, I'm like, interesting. So I use that a lot. Also, just in a way, we run the office. We use that a lot when I need information. It's actually quite incredible the kind of information you can have. But as a design tool, not yet. And I think it's a matter of time, obviously. But all the things I've seen or I've tested myself in terms of spatial design or renderings or all these things, I've been kind of like so far like largely disappointed, and I'm maybe a little bit still old school, and we still like use like the traditional rendering and 2D and 3D softwares for that. But it's a tool, and I think it's a bit like, again, say when we were back then talking about music, saying like the internet will like kill music, and now people say AI will kill like creativity. Maybe for a lot of architects and designers, it will be a big problem because, if you're just a labor worker working for a big corporate office and then you're drawing, let's say, plans, housing plans or office plans, and then you just a tool for your clients to optimize costs, then maybe you should be worried about your job, that for sure, and maybe for the better as well. But I think it's just a tool, and then it will change a lot the way we work and the way we do things. But I think the thing that I'm kind of convinced, honestly, is that at the end of the day, AI will not be able to give you a new point of view about things and about the world. And yes, if you ask, can you create a design for me? It will probably do it. But I think what is so unique about the real creative person is that unique point of view. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe in 10 years I'll be totally wrong, but I feel like what AI cannot do is to take that personal point of view you have as a person and as a human being. And that is, at the end of the day, when people call you as a creative, a designer, or graphic designer, or web designer, whatever you do in life, then they want your point of view, And I think a lot of things can be replaced by artificial intelligence. But if you're strong enough to have like a deeply personal point of view and a story to tell, then I don't know if a computer can replace that, And I don't know, I was seeing this interview is Diplo was asked the same question about music, and Diplo was saying, well, actually he was talking about vocals, and then he was saying, rightly, I think that AI can generate vocals for a song in a very good way compared to like a vocal singer, so that replaces a task. But if you're a music producer, yes, you can create a song. You could make 5 new albums for Drake within a weekend. Within an hour, you can drop 5 new albums from Drake for songs you never heard of before. But at the end of the day, I think if you're looking for a new point of view and someone that is generally human, and I think that people want at the end of the day, then AI is a tool that you might be able to use, but might not replace you. So at the end of the day, if we just look at labor and workforce and then employment, I think architecture and then a lot of creative jobs are at risk for sure. But I think there's a spectrum, and then that's a matter of like understanding where you are in the labor spectrum. And indeed, if you are like on the side of labor, and then if on one hand there's labor and the other side there's creativity, you just have to make sure your cursor is always on like creativity. And then in that sense, you should not be worried about AI, and then you use it as a tool, and then being smart with it.
Thank you. So does anybody have any questions for Paul? I'll just pass around the mic.
First of all, thanks for the inspiring talk. and I'm a big fan of your work and also Sabine. So, and my question is regarding this space. While designing specifically this room, why did you choose, or what was your decision-making process behind using this inflatable sphere, not an inflatable donut? Because if you use a donut, that would highlight maybe the cabinets more, or how did you came to this decision? Thank you.
Well, thanks for the question. What can I say? Yeah, definitely not a donut. To be very practical about it, we had a very limited budget, and the question is, how can you have a maximum impact with the minimum amount of money? And what you do, we do a lot of events, so we actually went to a production company that does a lot of these inflatable lights, and we ordered a 3-meter diameter light bulb, which can only be done, when you do events. And then that was for like I don't remember the price, but for like, let's say, a minimum amount of money, could have the highest impact. And then this RGB light, and I love RGB. The first space is also a little bit based on that, because at night now it's bright, so you don't really see the difference, but you can change the color. So you can make a red room, a blue room, just by using a little pump and a few LED strips, and that's the cheapest thing you can do. And we literally did nothing in that space. This is a found space. We have a carpet, a cabinet, and a big light in the middle, and that kind of does the job. So that was the idea. But if you want to conceptualize it, you can see a sunset in it. You can see, I don't know, you can imagine anything you want. I just like inflatables. I like lights. So here you go.
Once again, in a time of crisis and constraint, you find your creativity.
Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. I have a question. So you mentioned that you guys had the idea of making an experience, making space instead of like a showcase or shop. But as an architect or design studio, how do you measure sales, I would say? Because do you know that or do you have any measurements that it's going to have positive or negative impact on the sales of the brand for similar experiences? Or have you ever had clients that said, oh, it's nice, people can come have a gathering, party, coffee, but what about my sales? Because a lot of these experience-making spaces are really nice, but they are not much long-lasting. I think Link & Co. recently in Hackeshamart closed.
Who?
So Link & Co. It's the car brand. They also had like a similar, it was experience more than just like selling cars. And yeah, what was like your measurements?
Yeah, I guess that you can. I'm not behind the numbers, so I have no idea. That's like where it's great to be creative. Sometimes you don't have to worry about some numbers. So I don't know, but
Maybe Ben can answer that.
We have the spreadsheets. But if I can just answer on my perspective, or Ben, you go ahead and I'll follow up on that.
Yeah, great question. So we kind of deliberately made a sacrifice, knowing that we could probably sell more if we did it in a more retail way, but that was not the aim for us. This is also part of giving back to the Berlin community, which has tens of thousands of homes for Tylko, and so that was it from the start and the conception and the idea. But we're in our 6th month now of operations. We have officially opened mid-February, and it's going very well. It's actually going better than we expected in our forecast. So despite the fact that it's not an ordinary showroom, it works and it serves a lot of customers. So you don't always have to be very commercial to get the business working, I guess.
Yeah, and that's a little bit what I wanted to add, is that indeed, like if you it makes sense on a business perspective to say, well, we make a space, we have to pay for it, it's an investment, we need return on it. But I think what is interesting of what is happening now, and this is the reason I think at the moment why we as Cloud work with quite a bunch of brands or commercial clients, I feel that the interesting brands understand also that there's a part of the business that is about sales and then growth and then, the business kind of case. But in an era where there's so much competition, there's so many brands doing the same thing, It's a very noisy and crowded market, and every kind of level you do, from the top luxury to the mainstream to the lower range of products. I think a lot of brands are looking for creating cultural relevance, and I think what I appreciate is that I think Tylko understood that, and I think it's not only about having a lot of followers on Instagram and having very high sales on your board meeting. I think if you want to, Tylko has been celebrating 10 years now, and I think a lot of brands understand that if you want to play the long run, you have to find that how you can tap into the culture, and how do you do that today, And I think a lot of the work we do with commercial clients, we're creating spaces that have technically zero commercial value, because I think you need, as a brand, spaces that show that you care about your people, and you add so much to your value of your brand by creating a space for free where you can come for a coffee in a city, than having a showroom where you can sell shelf, because you can do that online anyways. And I think a lot of more and more, there's this also post-COVID, there's this idea of like being analog and having this in real life moments, because people just want to hang out and be together. And I think if you think of it of perspective from the consumers, because it's always about that, like, what do you guys want? Do you guys want a showroom, or do you want a space where you can listen to talks and have a free coffee? And I think the maths are very easy. You just want to come, hang out, have a coffee, have a great drink, and meet people, bring your friends, and come back, And if, as a brand, you're able to create spaces for that, either permanently or through events, bring DJs, organize parties, yes, it feels like a lot of probably investments. But at the end of the day, if the brand puts it into the perspective of the shoes of the customers, hopefully tomorrow you will go to your friend and say, I had a great time at this Tylko showroom, and we had such a great time. And then through the word of mouth, I think it just creates cultural relevance that more and more brands will have to tap into, and I think the brands that understand that are the ones that I think will really strive in the coming 5 to 10 years for sure.
Thank you so much, Paul. Super grateful to work with you and learn from you, and even this conversation I feel extremely relevant, and the relevance is coming not only from cool words of architecture for people, but also a new approach to retail space. And I was curious, since it's architectural project, how do you see, both you and Ben as a creator of this brand, a certain scalability of the approach of the cultural relevance that you put first on the table, even before the product? Do you see it as a possibility to be scalable in different places and in different physical kind of scales, or you see it as a very unique product and project that you've done and gifted to Berlin?
Do you want to take that one, Ben?
Yeah, I can try. So short answers, I don't know. I think we just want to see what happens here and how it goes. We definitely are thinking about expanding our own stores. We also have partner stores that don't belong to us. We have 10 of them, that they have operators, they're in different cities. They're more commercial. They're for people who really want to check out the product and touch it and see it before they buy. But yeah, let's see how this space turns out and what the next spaces will turn into. We definitely also want to use our online platform for building cultural relevance. So we've been working with graphic designers, illustrators, CGI artists for years, and we've done probably hundreds of collabs with them on multimodal with multimodal outcomes. And I think this is definitely something we will continue, because that's kind of how the brand was born, by tapping into this graphic design community and working with them. And now I think the next frontier is music with Tylko Sound. So we also have some cool things cooking with artists on that. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun for us, and that's what we want to do. So if it can support the brand, and if there's a hopefully some business around the corner from that, then that's great. But if this is scalable to other cities, for example, I don't know yet, to be honest. I don't know if it probably is, but are we willing to do it and lose focus here? I think that's an open question still.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a beta project here where it's like, we don't know, it's like Tylko Space ? But I think we will learn a lot from that experience. And my guess is that I think we found a formula that worked here for Berlin, for the space we had. You know, there were like a lot of like things that made sense to do that here right now. But I think if, you know, a project like that could travel, I think it would just probably have a very different form. So I would love at some point that we do like a Tylko listening space, like a proper one, you know. That could be a way to do it, but there's many other ideas. I think what is great about like a company like Tylko, I think about it, don't get me wrong, like almost like as a production partner where you can do so much, you know. We were like, let's build a library room, but you guys have veneer panels, so let's use your panels to clad the room, you know. And I think that's what's so interesting about that, is that's so versatile that it's not like a phone or a shoe, where this is the product. It's more like a philosophy and it's a way of doing things. So based on that, you could do so much. I mean, now we're going to release speakers, but tomorrow we could do something else as well. It's just like wood, you know. What can you not do with wood, right? That's a little bit that. So we'll see.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we're nearing the end, so maybe one last or two.
Thank you. I've lost my voice, so the microphone's very helpful. I was very interested in when you mentioned earlier that you reverse engineer the design process and how normally people start with the concept, the design, and then cross their fingers and give it to someone else to solve the problem, how to produce it. And I work with brands, organizations, trying to work with architects to start with defining what the transformation and experience is for the people, rather than architects find the public annoying that they're coming into the space and ruining their design. And I've got a project at the moment to rebuild a funeral home, and we've had to fire, well, not me, but the clients had to fire the architects because we created a whole experience brief, like a whole book, and they just wanted to build concrete, couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
And in architecture, when it comes to education as well, they may give lip service to human-centered, but they don't start with thinking about the audience or the public and then let that inform what the concept will become, what the design will become in service of creating community and connections, as you mentioned. And I just wondered, with your approach being quite unique in the field, do you see hope for others in the industry to start moving in this direction as well?
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like, again, like from where I come from, you know, as a student, so that was, early 2000, I think the dream or the sort of like go-to was to work for like big names, you know, big like global companies. And more all the conversations I'm having with the younger generation, they give me so much hope because they don't want that anymore, you know. And all the conversations I'm having now really show me that everybody's kind of secretly aligned on the fact that we should retire the old generation, and there's like a breeding new generation of people that is so willing to do things differently. And that is so exciting to see. I don't know what form or shape it will be, and it will probably take a while before it settles and the older generation is out. But it's just a general mindset, and you know, if you think it's a good example, you say it's like kind of the client understood before the architect that we had made a switch already, you know. So the clients also themselves, they understand that there's things you can't do anymore, you know, and what used to be the norm is not acceptable anymore. So yeah, I feel like just it's a very interesting moment now. And I think this is maybe also the reason why I love, you know, doing magazines or being a podcast guy once in a while or launching a media platform, because I want to hear those voices. You know, I want to understand and sit down with people that they tell me what they think. because yeah, there's just so many interesting ideas that are out there, and then you have to be a bit like to do like flower picking, to connect. And I love, like, you know, being in the middle of all of that. And then so if I can bring an interesting creative, a graphic designer, an artist, a designer, and then finding a client that will, you know, support the project. I think, you know, there's just a lot of interesting things that can be done. So yeah, again, I think you have to, if you're like positive and hopeful, I mean, from now to the 10 coming years, the world might go through doom, but it might also generate a very interesting generation of new talents that are just all here.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, this is our last one.
Thanks for the great talk. Maybe my question has to do a bit more with your design process. Obviously, in a more academic settings, as architects, we're kind of given a generic backbone of what a design process can look like. But obviously, this changes and gains its individuality through praxis. And so I was wondering, maybe you could share like a design habit that you've, or even just a general habit that you've kind of incorporated into your design process that you feel like is integral to how you design now.
Like what? Like a trick?
A trick? I don't know. Something that, yeah, thought process. Something that you feel like breaks away from what is, yeah, the generic sort of backbone.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, like for instance, the way I work, I have like a small team with like 6 people in the studio, and I love, I don't know, I just get so much energy from my team, and I think it's just, I feel very fortunate to have like interesting people around me. And I think if I could give you a trick, I think what I love, or don't know, I guess it feeds my design process, so the way I think about things, but just surround yourself by interesting people. And whether they are good friends, whether they are doing the same thing as you or something very different, but all of your ideas, you can think as much as possible, or like do the hard thing just on your own, just working really hard, which you have to do in any case. But this thing of like just surrounding yourself by inspiring people would make the whole difference. And yeah, if I could give an advice, or what I really get my inspiration from is like this thing of music. You know, if I think Ben was not playing ping pong with me and like pushing me and me pushing him, and that would have never happened, you know. But it's just when you have those conversations that it can lead to something. Yeah, that's that. And then what else? Buy books. I love books. The only thing I collect is books. So I always, the only thing that I really buy, it's like interesting, funny books. I love it. I find that like such a good way of communicating stuff. It's something that even more than records, probably. It's like I always got a lot of inspiration from books. I love making books, designing books, but I love people making books as well. So that podcasts also really good. Books, have good friends. Yeah, then you're good.
Yeah, I was looking forward to like every day I get up at 4 a.m., go for a run, a cold shower, But good friends is also, you know, fair enough.
Yeah.
So, Paul Cournet, everybody, thank you.
Thank you. And what's that? What's now? Drinks? What is Tylko offering now?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, feel free to hang out, grab a drink if you want. They're in the other room. And yeah, if you have any other questions to any of our teammates or to each other, use the space and time.
Thank you.
Thank you.